My name is Grace Marie Goodeagle. I am a member of the O-Gah-Pah and the Potawatomi. Well, I didn't have anything to do with Creator was the one that gave me to my father and my mother. So I was born to them, Paul and Marie Goodeagle. So, and then that was my father's side. Then on my mother's side, she's O-Gah-Pah and Potawatomi. Her mother was Grace Red Eagle. So I'm Red Eagle also. So I'm O-Gah-Pah and Potawatomi. And actually the name is O-Gah-Pah. It kind of got changed over the years because people couldn't say our name or spell it, so we ended up O-Gah-Pah. But our real name is O-Gah-Pah.
And what does O-Gah-Pah mean?
Downstream people, that's part of our history, moving west.
Tell me like I don't know this story at all. When downstream people, why would they choose that name? Why was that name part of the history?
The O-Gah-Pah, like many native peoples in this part of the world at that time, moved around a lot. Because when you consider the world, there's North, there's Central, there's South America. So here in this part of the country, people moved around quite a bit. Now the O-Gah-Pah did too. They moved around a lot. So they started up north around Canada, then they came farther south. And then, of course, there were no states at that point. So as far as location now, the southern part of the states and around. And fortunately, I was able to go on one of the elders' trips. And we toured mounds. And there were a couple of mounds in Tennessee on the east side. And also the lower Ohio Valley is where the O-Gah-Pah lived for many years. But then people knew that others were coming from the east, so we would probably be moving west. And so the O-Gah-Pah started out, Omaha and many other tribes. We got to the Mississippi. Okay, then trying to get across the Mississippi. How are they going to do that? And for those that did, they made it across the river. But it was a matter of once they were on the other side, on the west side of the river, the Omaha went north, the O-Gah-Pah went south. So we were the downstream people. And we ended up in what is now southeast Arkansas. And they lived there for many years. But there are mounds where the O-Gah-Pah used to live on the Tennessee side. And it was very interesting to be there and know something about the history when they lived there. In fact, one of the mounds had even a moat around it. So there's a lot of stories along with that. But the one we're most familiar with, or two of them, on the Arkansas side, one is the mound that is now part of Arkansas Post. That's the one we're most familiar with. But there is another mound called Spiral Mound, and there's a lot of history to that, a lot of stories with that. And I was able to go on one of the trips that we were able to go, but on another trip, the area was flooded, so we were not able to go. But we're hoping in the future to get back there, but that's part of our history. And mounds are known throughout. In fact, there's a mound called Angel Mound in Indiana, and they said the O-Gah-Pah were there at one time. And so we're hoping the elders might be able to go in the fall when they have a museum and everything for Angel Mountain. So mounds are not only particular to the O-Gah-Pah, but other tribes too had mountains. And so, but that's how we got our movement west. And then again, they lived in southeast Arkansas Territory for a number of years, but then entered into treaties in the early 1800s. And then they continued moving west, but they, like many other tribes, in addition to the Cherokee, had trails of tears. We lost many members as they made the movement to Indian territory. And then eventually, my ancestors and my father, grandpa, ended up in here, what is now northeast Oklahoma. So we've moved around, but we're here, but we still think of home being elsewhere too. This is our newer, we've only been here in northeast Oklahoma for a couple of 100 years. So it's relatively new to us, but this is our land.
When you're talking to the next generation and teaching people about the O-Gah-Pah culture, how do you describe the treaties that you mentioned and subsequently the Trails of Tears and the relocation? And feel free to be very transparent with this, but when you're telling the next generation of O-Gah-Pah about the treaty, how do you explain it to them?
There is the involvement of the United States government. They impacted the East Coast first with the tribes there. And as they made their movements west, it was the military and the priests. They traveled together and encountered many native peoples. It was because of the government, and we knew people were coming, well, our Indian humor, a couple of braves apparently were on the East Coast, and they saw those ships out in the ocean. And they thought, oh, and they saw a little boat coming towards the shore. So one man looked to the other and he said, do you think they're going to want to stay overnight? They came, and they came, and they came. So being in southeast Arkansas, they decided, the leaders at that time, that yes, we should enter into treaties with the United States government in exchange for land in Indian territory, among other things. And so, yes, they entered into treaties with the thought that, yes, we would have land in Indian territory, so we would move the people here. And so, again, we had our own Trail of Tears. But the survivors made it, and our leaders made it, and my grandfather's father were part of that group. And there were pictures that were show my grandfather there, and then later on, then his first son with Watanoshe, their pictures are part of the group. So they made it, they're survivors, and so now we're descendants.
When you were told those stories when you were little, how were they told to you? What was the emotion of the stories? When these stories were told to you, were they upset about the treatment? Were they upset about the treatment? What was their emotion as they told you these stories when you were little?
Well, certainly as a child, you don't understand a lot of it. And there was a lot that they didn't tell us either at that time. So, but it was a matter of this was to be our new home. They liked Spring River. There was a rich farming land here, and then later mining. But they decided that yes, this is where we would stay, and it later became an area that attracted others. So with the county, Ottawa County here in Oklahoma, there were 9 tribes all in the state. The Quapaw were first. We came here, and there was actually a Quapaw agency not too far from here. And so the people did settle in, and they built homes. There was a spring river, and so to get across it was something else. But many did, and so they built homes on the east side of the river over there. But our relationship with the government has not always been that good. Yes, they signed treaties, and then we made our movement here. And dealing with the federal government, at one time, of course, then we were considered as wards of the United States government, so there was the military presence. But then it was the intention of the government that, yes, there would be, they needed to create a Bureau of Indian Affairs to help people, because we didn't understand really currency, money, how that was in any kind of deeds or leases or rents, royalties. We didn't know a lot about that. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs was created. We were actually first under the Department of War, and then we became under the Department of Interior. So I thought, well, if we're with fish and wildlife and animals, I guess that's okay. So we were part of the Interior Department, and that's where the Bureau of Indian Affairs came in. And so yes, the Bureau of Indian Affairs had an office, and they were to help the Native peoples with dealing with all kinds of things, but a lot of it had to do with land. But, and so that was their job. But later years, our people felt well, they weren't doing us right. I mean, with governmental agencies and offices, something of a, well, if you work for federal government, you know about bureaucracies. And so with the Bureau, they had, and I will say I did know some of them, and some of them were good, but then there were some that were not good. And so that's where we really had problems. And so even my grandparents, they knew about it. Then my parents knew about it, and then came my generation. And so with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, again, the relationship was kind of rocky, really. Yes, the Bureau was doing its job. It was collecting rents, royalties, getting all these leases and things, and getting money for the rents and royalties. And then that was supposed to be then passed on to the landowners. Well, in some cases that didn't happen. And so there have been some lawsuits by other tribes as well, saying that the government did not turn over all the money to the people as they were supposed to. And in questioning the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they lost millions of dollars. They don't know. They say they don't know what happened to it. And then even there was a fairly recent lawsuit, Cobell, and said, you guys didn't do a very good job. And in my generation, knowing what my grandfather and my dad went through, we sued the United States government too about their handling of our land. We won. So it's still kind of a rocky relationship, but it is getting somewhat better. But not only the O-Gah-Pah, but other tribes I know have had problems with the government and how they were handling our affairs, and now more and more tribes are doing it themselves.
I think a lot of people have the perception that this is the Indians versus government. This is something of the past. This is something of the Trail of Tears. It's something long ago.
It's history.
Right. They feel like it is just history and not something that is still going on today. What would you say to somebody like that has this perception that, oh, that's in the past. That was just some strife from before. Not anymore, though.
It still affects us. It still affects us because we do have a relationship with the government. And in the early days, it was a matter of the government even entering into treaties. It was supposed to be a government-to-government relationship, so that our leaders were expecting to go to Washington, D.C., to transact business and deal with the President of the United States, just as we were leaders. And in the beginning, it probably did happen that way, but I know we did have our people who went to Washington. My grandfather, Francis, was a negotiator during the time that Tall Chief was chief. And he made trips, my grandfather, to Washington. Sometimes we got favorable results, but oftentimes that was not the case. And even today, as many tribes now are becoming nations and are becoming sovereign nations, there still is that difference in our dealings with government to government.
Is Quapaw, I think I remember Sonny saying that, is Quapaw a sovereign nation?
Is it what? I'm sorry.
Is Quapaw a sovereign nation?
Yes.
Okay, when did that happen? And you don't know the exact date?
It fairly recently, and I know other tribes too have made that determination and are recognized as a sovereign nation. So it's been a battle for some time now of being sovereign, as we always have been, really. But then with the federal government, then that changed as they were trying to do more. And finally we decided we can handle our own affairs.
And this is going to be an obvious answer, but why was it important for Quapaw to become a sovereign nation? Why did the tribe want that?
If you think in terms of tribes, and that's a term that's used, it's the people themselves. The people are taking care of themselves. They are caring for them. I met a woman from the Aboriginal people in Australia. They have a setup very much that each person in their group has something to do. And together then, that's how they live. So with us, whether it was the Cherokee or the Osage or whoever, for the most part, people took care of themselves. And that's where your leadership came in. You were caring for your people, you were providing for them, and that kind of thing. And that to us is sovereignty. That we are again in a position where we can do that better. We're not dependent on the federal government. We're handling our own affairs as we see fit. Not to have the government do things for us, but with us. There is a difference.
You mentioned that it was correct me if I'm wrong, your grandfather's father was on the Trail of Tears, is that right?
Yes.
Great, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you mentioned, this isn't ancient history. This is something that is very recent that you've gone through.
A couple of hundred years ago.
A couple hundred years.
And on our tours with the elders, we have gone down to Fort Smith and some of those areas, and we've seen where our people had to go to get supplies and get food and that kind of thing. Living conditions were not good.
Tell me, and this is more of an opinion question, but do you think it's the fact that that the tribe has faced countless obstacles and oppression and just incidents of suffering throughout, from the Trail of Tears, but then continually from the government? Has it created a stronger culture in Quapaw? Do you think it's because it's a tribe of very much survivors that have not only survived but then gone on to flourish and do these things, that it has created a culture that is stronger because of it?
Some of the people are stronger for it. Others, not so. This can happen. it's the sort of thing that's where we fall back on our heritage, our culture, and that's where we rely on our ancestors, because we learn from them how to be people. And some are doing better in recent generations. There are so many distractions, one thing and another, that they're getting away from the ways of the people. And so the elders, now that I'm an elder, we see that, and we're doing what we can to teach, because there is a better way of life than some are living now. And because we have to think of future generations. But it's the sort of thing that we're trying to revive as much as we can, and things like such as you're doing now is the fact of the memories. The memories are so precious. And for those of us who knew our grandparents or great-grandparents, now we have 5 generations in some families, but those memories and the stories they could tell, oh my goodness, it's just wonderful. But we have to keep those alive, very much so. So we're not in a museum or something, we're living people, just like everybody else. And if your nationality is, if you're English or you're Scottish or Irish, it's important to you. You have to know your people. And that's what we're trying to do through families and all, to again keep some of the ways alive and being able to tell things that we have learned. Now, it depends, being a parent, you can talk to a child and they may or may not get it. You won't know until sometime later whether they got it or not, type of thing, and that's all we can do. But we have the knowledge, and some even have wisdom along with it. And so, having lived a long life, then we've had many, many experiences. So, but life is good. Should be good. Can be. Let's do it.
You just alluded to this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about the future generation. And maybe the first question just is, what do you want them to know? When you think about the next generation, what do you want them to place importance upon? What do you really want to instill in them? What do you want them to know?
It really comes from the family itself, because the family, genetically, you're going to have certain traits, skills, talents, and can develop those into skills. But now there has been a lot of intermarriage. So even some of our young people now, they may be members of 5 tribes, and each has its own history and background. Or if you marry someone from another race even, there's things to learn. There's such richness to life, to learn about each other. And so the children, as they're growing up, need to know something about each of them, because that's who they are. And for future generations, so much that many are in now is temporary, almost like a fad. They're trying, and we did that too as young people. We tried different things, and then after a while you decide, no, that's not the thing to do. And you have a choice. Then you go from there. But we're trying to, like even with education, I remember hearing a university professor at commencement. He said, all these years you've been spending in schools, teachers. He said, now you're ready to go out into the world. What do you know? After all of this, what do you know? And it's a good question, because life is an education itself. And so, but we want to try to prepare people as best we can. But in teaching people, and I tell people too, it used to be when I was growing up, the family would be out and they would see somebody needing help. And so with the boys particularly, they said, go help them. And they would. They'd go over and they'd help them. Next time around, go help them. After a while, you don't need to be asked. You do it. Somebody needs help. You go. And so these are just some of the things that all people can learn and should. And if someone is in an accident or something, like I've had several lives really, but if a person is hurt, it doesn't matter to me who it is or whatever. Somebody's hurt. An animal is hurt. Can I do something or find help? And that's what we should do, and that's who we should be as people.
Very well said. Can I ask you a little bit about the powwow and your experience with the powwow?
Oh, well, with powwow, it's quite an event because it's a gathering of so many of our families and people we know, people from other tribes. And growing up, it was a matter of everybody was getting ready for powwow, getting all of their attire ready. But it was a time when other tribes were invited. Come be with us. Come dance with us. Let's have some food together. And they would. In those days, though, a lot of them you had to travel by foot. They didn't have cars. This was before cars. It was better when they had cars. But people would come, and they would stay for days. Even our people, they would camp for several days. And at that time, it was visiting. You know how it is, being with a best friend or friends. You sit around and you talk about all kinds of things. It could be way in the middle of the night and you're still talking, type of thing, but you're together. And so for dancing, they bring drums and music and singing, and we just all get together and have a very good time. And that's where we learn other songs, we learn other ways of dancing, and that kind of thing. And your dance you can tell what tribe where they're from by their attire. But it's really a fun time as a kid growing up. I remember we'd be at the camp, but the kids, they wouldn't let us stay up late, not for the late dancing. But I'd be in the tent, and I'd be on the ground, and I'd be sleeping, but I could hear the music. And that's one of my favorite memories, of hearing the music, being, in bed. But, it was only later that I could get out, and dance too, stomp dance and do all those kinds of things. But there were a lot of things that they did then. But mainly it was the camps. You went from camp to camp, you had coffee, you had Kool-Aid, you had all these different things. Everybody was welcome. I know I have a cousin, and with his camp, everybody was welcome. It was just open. They had plenty of food, plenty of drink. No one was turned away. And that's the way it can be. But it's just a matter of people nowadays, our young people text, my grandkids text, and face-to-face, Zoom meetings, and all this kind of thing, which are good, but you need that person-to-person contact. You really do. And we've moved away from that a lot. You call, use your phone to get information. You get a recording, or you get someone, but it's not the same. as being able to go into the bank and talk to a teller. Now you have your ATMs and you can just do it. Everything is online now, which is a convenience for a lot of people, I guess, but I don't know, I miss that human contact. So powwows, and we reciprocal. They would invite us to go to their place, and we would. And so we traveled all around, and there was nothing to think of dancing until in the morning and then making your way home. And so we know a lot of back roads.
That's fantastic. I do want to talk about that memory you had in the tent when you could hear the music and how much that meant to you when you weren't allowed to stay up late.
Kids weren't.
Yeah, that's true. Kids weren't allowed to stay up late.
Right.
Because one of the constant themes through all these interviews is the importance of music and the importance of the drum. And for people outside the culture, it's hard to wrap your mind around the importance of the drum and what it means. So in your own words, what does the drum mean to you?
Well, it's the whole setting itself. I know my cousin took me to a powwow one time, and it was way out in the field. So we drove out there, and cars were all in a circle with the headlights on, so there were lights. But music is an expression. And for those who are on the drum and singing the music, they learn the music and they practice. But to have a young person, even a son or somebody, to join them so they can learn. And they just like to sing all the time. We'd be in the car and somebody be singing along or whatever, but it's the music, that is that drum beat, it's the heartbeat type of thing. And other groups of people, the drum is that gives you your rhythm and that kind of thing. The singing, and many are singers, and we learn the songs type of thing. Songs are made up about stories and people and that kind of thing, so there's meaning to it. But then for real dancing, then it's a matter, now it's contest time, and they get choose a best dancer. But if there are no contests, if you're just out there dancing, I know what I like very much is being on earth. You have that feeling with earth. It gives you that little cushion so that when we go to other events where there are concrete floors or it's like football, they might like to play on real grass as opposed to that artificial turf. There's just such a feel, and we're in tune with nature. So to be outside and the stars and the moon, and you could just sing as loud as you want, and it doesn't bother anybody, but to know those songs and they're familiar, then you just go with it. But for singing and dancing, particularly the singing and dancing, it's an expression. They are singing something. There's a different, I had a really good friend, and he was telling me someone had given me a book about music, Indian music. And he was aware of it, because I shared it with him, but he said, in the book, he said, for instance, they talk about drum, but you have to hear the drum. There's a way to strike the drum, a sharp one, or not so soft drumming. There's a difference. How do you say that in words in a book? You don't. You can't. You have to be there. You have to experience it and go with it.
How does it make you feel when you hear that drum, when you hear the reverberations? How does it make you feel?
It's familiar. I mean, when I was working in Washington, D.C., we had a number of people who would come in on occasion. It was like home to hear the music. I mean, there are tapes and all kinds of things available, but there's nothing like being there. And you can, and people do have CDs and all kinds of things. You can do that, but there's nothing like just really hearing the drum, and it's distinguished. I mean, you can tell when it's Indian music, and it's just familiar. You know it.
Tell me a little bit about traditions that have been passed down. And I'm going to list a couple, and you can choose all of them, you can choose one of them, or none of them if none of this resonates with you. But when you think of the things that you have been taught, or the things that you're passing down, when it comes to art or craftsmanship, or pottery, or silversmithing, or cooking, or preserving, or harvesting, are there any things that jump to the front of your mind of things that were passed down to you, or things that you have passed down to the next generation? Does anything stick out to you?
Well, I've done some basketry, some pottery, but I really didn't know until fairly recently when someone gave me the obituary for my grandpa, Francis, when he passed away. Up until that point, I didn't really know he was a negotiator for the tribe. Now, I have cousins who were in law and different things, and musicians and that kind of thing. But I thought, for me, that was passed down in dealing with people, understanding, having empathy for people. That's my strong point. And so, but I can use that in other places. But whatever develops out of it, type of thing. And it's wonderful for my friends who are masters in pottery or that kind of thing. Even when I was in school, I had an older brother. And piano, pipe organ, saxophone, clarinet, all of that. So here comes younger sister, and they're expecting all of this out of me. So I take piano, but clarinet was never my instrument. But what I found for all of the, my brother was really, he was exceptional, instrumentalist. I could sing. So that was the way I went. I never heard him sing, but I could sing. And I got drafted at an early age to sing, like with a church choir. I was a freshman in high school, and the director was at the college, and my brother was the organist. And they were doing something from Handel's Messiah, and they said, "We need altos." Well, I got drafted, because I was in the youth choir anyway. And my brother said, well, he would help me learn the alto part. So I got into high school, and music has always been in my background anyway. It really wasn't until I got into college and studied vocal studies. I have a whole range. I started out as an alto, but I was really a soprano. So that just opened a whole world. But music has always been a part of our families, particularly with the Goodeagle family. I have a relative, her name was Mary Goodeagle, and she was a well-known singer. Oh, golly. And again, I think we picked up a lot of our music from the Goodeagle side of the family. And now with the Goodeagle family, I think it was more of a business, organizational type of thing with that. And so, but you have your life's experiences, whether you're working or whatever your interest where they may lead you. But all in all, there's just so much. And you have, one of my experiences, I was living in San Francisco, and there was a musical group. They were called the Opera Ring. And a friend of mine got me interested, and I went. But with Opera Ring, they did musicals, like West Side Story and that kind of thing. But it was a theater in the round. And so your singers and dancers, we were all stationed at ends of it. We would go down to the stage, do a jazz split, and exit. Okay, we started out, but some got down there and they stopped. Well, of course, that stopped everybody else behind them. And so after a while, it just chaotic. The director got us out. She said she wanted everybody down on the stage. So we went down there. And she was a small woman, but very good, very good. She looked at all of us and she said, don't you ever say you can't do something until you've given it a good, honest try. So we went back out. We did it again, and we did it better. But I thought about that afterwards, and I thought, that could apply to a lot of things. You know, try it. And I've learned, pleasantly surprised, I could do a lot of things. Of course, there were some things that weren't so successful. Nevertheless, there were a lot of things I could do, but I didn't really think about it until I tried it. So even what was it? One of those Star Wars things, you know, and we had Yoda down here, and he said, "Don't try, do it." And that's the next phase. That just do it. So it's been an interesting life, I tell you.
Yeah. Tell me, because I want to get your notes in just a little bit, but let's finish up with Quapaw in general. I guess the first question should just be, are you proud to be Quapaw?
I'm sorry?
Are you proud to be Quapaw?
I've not known anything else. I mean, I'm Quapaw wherever I am, really. With I'm working or I'm at meetings, whatever. And I tell people, hey, we could be on the moon. We're still Quapaw. That's who we are. Our blood is mixed now. I have Goodeagle blood in me, and I have Red Eagle blood in me. And that's who I am. And I've, as it were, come to terms with it. I've accepted it, and that's who I am.
What do you think, and this is a very loaded question, you can take it wherever you want to go with it, but what do you think makes the Quapaw people special? What makes the Quapaw culture unique when you think about its history and the suffering and the overcoming and where you are today and the flourishing and the things you've gone on to do? When you think of Quapaw culture, what makes it special?
It has to be the people. Many books have been written. There's much that has been written about us. And some people have had some difficulty with some of the anthropologists and the archaeologists. That's their perception. And so when they write their books and they're published and the whole thing. But we are who we are, type of thing. And some of the accounts that I have read were, the Quapaw were known as a friendly people, a generous people, just a generally you like to be around them. And I think even of my mother, you know, she was a gentle person, but gentle but she could be strong. She was like many of the other women who were single mothers when the men were off to war. They took care of everything. So they're heroes too. But it's just the people themselves. And we had nothing to do that. We were all created. So we can be thankful for that.
You just mentioned the war. I do want to confirm a story that we heard in an earlier interview. Is it true that when the men went off, and I'm not sure which war it was, but when a lot of the tribe went off to war, at that powwow, the women danced in their place. And then the story that we heard is that when the men came back and said, we're going to dance now, the women said, no, we're going to dance too. Do you remember anything like that? Have you heard any of that stories like
I
that?
don't remember that, but I can understand it.
It makes sense, huh?
I can understand it in the sense that women were doing many things and are capable of doing it. But of course, this is my feeling too. The men have their rights, duties, roles, and the women have theirs. And there are many situations where really it's the men who are the leaders. And that's fine. That's me. I don't necessarily need to be a leader. I can be and do at times. However, I'm inclined to think there's just some things that men should be doing. And the women are right beside them, or behind them, sometimes pushing. But I think there is a difference in the roles.
Well said. You have some notes. Is there anything that you want to talk about? That's the core of the interview for us.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything with your notes, anything you'd like to talk about?
Well, it's a sort of thing of, over my lifetime, I have done many things, and part of it is some of the things that we are taught, and I live, type of thing. And I try to tell this even to some of our leaders now, is the fact that one thing was, you don't bring attention to yourself. You just don't do that. Now others can do that to give you, but you don't promote yourself, type of thing. That And when you serve, you serve. You're not expecting money for it. You serve. You're thanked in different ways, which is fine, and we have our ways to do that too. But some of the stories that were told me and experiences that I've had, one being, I was in Colorado taking care of a mountain home for friends. They were off in Italy, but they had 2 cats and a dog. And so I would stay in people's homes and care for the animals. They had their own routine, their bedding, they had their food, their drink, the whole thing. So I was there in mountain home, beautiful view at the patio and the whole thing. A bird came in, hummingbird. One of the things that we were told, you don't want a bird in the house. You just don't. So the bird got in, and it was a hummingbird, and they had big bay windows, and so it was on the windows. And I thought, oh, how am I gonna, because I wanted to catch it and take it outdoors. So I got a plastic container. Of course, I got the dogs and the cat around me. But anyway, I was able to catch the hummingbird in a plastic container, and I got it. So I took it outside to the patio, the balcony, and I put it down on the chair. And then I took the lid off, and it just lay there. And I thought, oh, I hope it's okay. I didn't scare it to death or whatever. So I looked at it, and it was just lying there. And then I touched it, flew away. We don't like birds in the house because they're the spirit of someone who has passed away. The bird takes its form, and it goes around to visit different ones before it leaves. So the bird came, and it was there. I didn't know who it was, but then I found out it was my favorite cousin. She had died, so she had come to visit me. So that's, again, why we don't like birds in the house. The screech owl, they're messengers of death. And there's just so many experiences that have happened with me. And I do share some of those with when they're ready, my grandkids. I feel so blessed of having such a wonderful family. Like my uncle, when I was young, they had a place there on the river. And so one night we went out there, one of the little country roads, his pickup truck. And so I was in the middle, and somebody and my uncle said, "Spook light." So we could see the light bouncing around over there, and getting closer to the truck and the whole thing. So just being in this part of the country and growing up, there's all kinds of experiences. So we've adapted. We know where the wild onions grow, and we know the different things, but I guess we're a very adaptable people. And that's important too, that you can adapt where you are and make the best of it.
Can you think of any other stories of that nature that, whether they're stories that were passed down to you, or stories that were your favorite that you heard growing up, or any stories that are typically told in the O-Gah-Pah community or told down, through ancestors? Are there any other stories that you love?
There are just many stories, and I used to spend a lot of time in the Miami Nation tribe, the library. And I would be in the children's section, and I would read children's books. And wonderful stories, the Seneca stories, children's stories, how they explain things. And so that's been one of my dreams, and I don't know, I still may do it. I want to record children's Indian stories, because there's wonderful stories out there, how they explain why the leaves change color in the fall, or how different things, because they always use so many natural things. And that's the beauty of other communities. You really learn and share from one and enjoy with one another. And of course, the other aspect of my life has been being so involved in things, being able to travel abroad, receiving honors and awards. You don't go into something with that expectation. It's nice when it happens, and to have these awards and things and recognition. I mean, the governor of Oklahoma appointed me to a governmental Indian agency when I was in office. President of the United States appointed me to the National Advisory Council on Indian Education, and I've been able to travel, and with Indian women's groups too. There's one called Heart of the American Indian Women's Network, Indian women leaders. And that's where I met Mildred Cleghorn, Apache. Oh, she's just one of my favorite people. She is really quite a woman. And we've got a lot of wonderful people around, and I got a chance to experience a lot of things because of where I was. And I left Oklahoma after I graduated from high school. And I lived San Francisco, Denver, Washington, D.C., and then traveled all over, studied some languages. I'm glad I spoke Spanish, because they kept speaking to me in Spanish in San Francisco. I didn't know any because of the coloring of my skin. They thought I was Spanish. I took Spanish when I was going to night school there, San Francisco State. And the friends I made along the way, too. It's been a really good life. It's not over yet.
It is not over yet by any stretch of the imagination. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've covered most of the things because, again, trying to think in terms of condensing one's life and what one has done and all, which might be of interest to somebody. But with the AARP, Oklahoma, they have an annual Elders Honors where they honor people. So I received a medal and recognition in 2010. But part of that program is they want to highlight people who have done things to be an inspiration to others. And you can do that. And so I've had someone speak to me and said, my story inspired him. And I'm on a board for the lead agency and having to do with our super fund and that kind of thing. But she came up to me. We had met and she had interviewed me. And she came back that following year. And just this year, last October, she said she got her doctorate. And part of it, my interview was part of it. So when you can do things like that, and it's like being a teacher, you don't know. It may be years later till it comes back, that you've made a difference. And that's all we can hope for.